Yorke, are you presente? Hopefully he's coming soon. Oh. So our erstwhile host, Yorke, who's been a big support for all of us putting this on this event, he gets to put on his own show right now. So, Yorke, Rhodes, what are you going to talk to us about today? Get us while you're setting up.
So I'm going to do two things. One, just bring us back to the conversation earlier. And Sandra, if we could get some of the folks to maybe round up some of the folks that are outside and bring them in, that'd be great. Because it seems like there's like half the room is outside. And I also have the honor of having a special guest here today who I've coerced into coming up and joining me. So Trista Patterson, who is the Director of Sustainability for Xbox, is going to join me on stage, actually. Yeah. Welcome, Trista.
The camera will be over here. Do you want chairs?
Sure. Could you put those over here? There's another mic somewhere? Yeah. So Trista and I are going to have a conversation, since she was so gracious in joining me. Ah. Where's the other microphone?
Oh, right here.
Oh.
Just sitting here having a dialogue with your colleague here.
Awesome. So I guess the crowd will be in any moment now. What we were talking about earlier is the intersection between sustainability and forced labor and how that essentially overlaps the millions of participants in an upstream supply chain. And primarily at the moment is focused on forced labor compliance and how do we achieve that with emerging technologies, leveraging AI, leveraging things that look like blockchain because of the principles of blockchain that's very important in having guaranteed data sources with signatures and such. And I'm very fortunate to collaborate with Trista, who is in another line of business, the Xbox business. And maybe, Trista, you could just tell us, I'd love for you to do two things. One, introduce yourself and your background to start, and then also tell us a little bit about what you're doing here in New York during UNGA.
Sure. Is this on?
Yeah.
So this is quite impromptu. Thanks for putting me on the spot.
You're welcome.
Yorke. If Yorke is on the push end of technology, then for the moment, then I will speak to the voice of the pull end of technology, from demand side internal to the Microsoft system. I'm also speaking from the perspective of the gaming audience because gamers are younger. They are more integrated with more forms of technology. They come off of a very different consumer base. So that is to say, when we do things like supply chain for the Surface laptop and line, oftentimes we're dealing with institutions that are they have legal requirements to ask for certain properties, but those boundaries of the asking, the market signal to Microsoft to create a product are also defined by what is industry standards, what are the political or government requests coming in at volume and at scale. Yet gamers are located all around the world. They have different expectations, they have different understandings, they have different experiences when they're engaging with their devices, whether it's in energy consumption and access to renewable energy and the efficiency with which they're engaging with those grids, or the kinds of expectations they have for the materials. So, for example, the properties of reused plastic and turned into a controller, or recyclable batteries, or the repairability of their equipment that come into their households and the ability to turn that into circular processes. So everything that we translate through the gaming product line is very, very individualized consumer experience. Anything that is seen to inhibit that experience is obviously rejected. We oftentimes can't go ahead with things that are government mandates, but we can make big advancements in areas like that, the kinds of projects that Yorke is representing, because consumers really want them. And increasingly, we're putting out surveys to gamers at large events. For example, Gamescom. Gamescom had 350,000 attendees. This was just last month. And we put up a big, on the crown, they call it, Xbox sustainability. It's the first time it's ever shown up like that. And the advertisement that it's possible to developers to green their code or increase the energy efficiency of their coding, which pushes out into the source code energy efficiency in every single household in which the game is played. Whether it's on Xbox or whether it's on a competitive device or even on PC, we are reducing the emissions at scale because it's possible to green their code and alerting the consumers that there are properties that they can make changes about that. But we can also put out things like gamer quests, where they're running around the conference room picking up Game Pass rewards for answering questions that have to do with the desirability of different properties of their product line. For example, are they concerned about cause-related materials in their controller, whether it's marine plastic or recycled plastic bottles? What are their expectations? Do they think that those devices should be costing less? Or do they think that they're willing to pay more? What about recyclable batteries? What about forced labor? Are they aware that forced labor exists in the supply chain? Do they care about conflict minerals? Do they know what conflict minerals are? So when we get feedback at the consumer scale, it allows us to send a demand signal internal to product design in Xbox that's very responsive to what the consumer is experiencing and exhibiting preferences for. And then we can turn that kind of demand signal over to teams like Yorke's that then help to create the traceability and transparency and provenance documentation on both ends of the supply chain. So whether that's going very far upstream to the source of the materials or very, very far downstream, what happens when people return their devices and then they're able to either repair it, return it for responsible recyclability or repairability at scale, and also be able to redesign those products to increase the likelihood that that material will be brought into a circular system.
So hard question. When you think about things like the ocean mouse, what kinds of issues do you have to think about when you're thinking about that from a product perspective, and what is the ocean mouse?
So the ocean mouse is a standard computer mouse. It's made with recycled plastic from the ocean. And that is something that is very cause related. Consumers loved it. It was something interesting for us because, as I mentioned earlier, sometimes when you're using recycled material, the consumer's concept is, well, you guys didn't have to pay for that. The price should go down. Well, is where the production line comes from, and because of all the controls and because of oftentimes there are substances in recycled plastics that makes it very toxic or unable to recycle, sometimes production costs can go up higher. So on one hand, it's the consumer expectation we're thinking about. In the case of the ocean plastic mouse, consumers loved the look and feel of the mouse. They liked having it around. It's a point of discussion. People brag about it. They take their little pet mouse everywhere and they name it. They really love that mouse. Same thing has been for the Remix controller, where they really studied the substances by which they were going to be using in the textures. They used GIS contour lines to texture the Remix controller. That's all consumer regrind. And I think one thing that's really important is that when we're talking about different use of materials and increasing circularity of product line, if we're thinking about the large product line that we are creating, whether it's a laptop or a console, the refresh rate is very slow. It takes Surface refreshes about once every year. Xbox refreshes once every 5 to 7 years. So that means that if we're talking about redesign of a console, 7 years out, we're already past the 2030 goals. So what's really important for us is to use those opportunities to get products and materials and different characteristics into the consumer hands so that we can get immediate feedback. So that's where things like special edition controllers, you always see, oh, what the heck is up with all these different special edition controllers? Do we really need another version? But it's experimental because it gets materials into consumers' hands. We get immediate feedback as to whether or not they like it, they're responding to it, does it create a buzz? We use that feedback then in incorporating it and also understanding whether or not our suppliers are becoming versant in being able to get that material into something. Does it have the same robustness? Does it pass the same safety characteristics for fire retardancy and so on? So all those pieces go into decisions about using alternative materials in production line.
So interestingly enough, one thing you missed was games run in a cloud also, right? So we do have the same benefits of green code from Xbox games and other providers' games that are running in a cloud. And in addition, a software product like a game has a supply chain. It's just a software supply chain, right, with production and gaming teams who are using AI rendering tools, and they all have a carbon footprint, right? That is the upstream of a game, essentially, in terms of a carbon footprint. And one of the things that the Green Code Initiative does, it also helps those developers know what green code is and how to write code in a more cost-effective or carbon-effective way, right, as well.
Right. And so if we're thinking about the production chain on the coding side, how very, very difficult it is, just as I was mentioning, all the complexity there is in getting higher and lower in the material supply chain. There's also great difficulty and enormous complexity in going higher and lower in the digital supply chain as well. So that is to say, every time we are running a game on Xbox Game Pass, maybe running in the cloud, could be running on a console, but that game is created by a company somewhere that has its own scope 1, 2, and 3 footprint. The complexity of creating calculations for how we help those studios set targets and then bring those emissions down over time is enormously complex, and also for their understanding in the scheme of things, because they too have an upstream and a downstream. And blockchain is a really tremendous technology in terms of helping create visibility and traceability, and also to be able to create envelopes of emissions that can be parsed out. There is an enormous potential there for also being able to give visibility for certain aspects of emissions at certain gated times of information exchange. It's really critical at all points of digital production to be able to allow safe sharing of information between providers in order to increase that collaboration, and also allow organizations, and whether it's studios or different parts of the production, to set goals together and work collaboratively to bring those emissions down, because everybody plays a part.
I'm so glad you brought up blockchain without prompting. No, Trista and I have been collaborating since you've been at Microsoft, basically almost 3 years now. Yeah. And Trista also was one of the founders of Playing for the Planet. Can you tell us a little bit about that initiative?
Playing for the Planet, we celebrated yesterday for our 5-year anniversary. We established it at UN General Assembly. This was when I was working for UN Environment, and we brought together the lead CEOs from all of the major gaming companies in order to make a pledge. At that point in time, Microsoft has not yet made its 2030 goals. And when we were prompting Xbox to create commitments for climate, there was some consternation because gaming can't move forward without the other business groups. So we were really proud and happy to form one of the stimulus to consideration of how Microsoft might consider the all-up environmental goals. And we feel that we've been playing that role for many companies ever since. Currently, the organization Playing for the Planet represents 40 plus independent large AAA game companies. It represents the gaming activity of 1.5 billion game players, and it represents about $1 trillion in market cap. The gaming industry, in case many of you aren't aware, has 3.3 billion gamers worldwide. It represents $364 billion worth of revenue every year. That's more than Hollywood, Bollywood, professional sports, professional music, and theater receipts combined. And yet it's a sleeper in terms of economic sector, but it is enormous in terms of the consumer signal that can be sent. But that consumer signal can only be sent if gamers can express their preferences to companies that can yard up that information. And then we yard up that information, and individuals and organizations that are able to pass that information through electronic traceability and verification, so that way organizations like Microsoft can send the demand signal to suppliers, manufacturers, both upstream and downstream, to provide that same quality of product that those consumers are demanding. So we're really happy to celebrate the 5-year anniversary yesterday all together. And also we celebrated within Xbox. We are discussing publicly emissions prevention, because it's very difficult to get a statement about an accomplishment out, because there's such heavy regulation, rightly so, about anti-greenwashing. This is another place where I think blockchain has really great potential, because it allows for the documentation and verification. The difficulty of companies talking about what's working and what is making them successful makes it very, very difficult to talk about those wins in such a way that other organizations can pick that up. So we were quite proud yesterday to be able to speak publicly about the emissions prevention within just the green coding and energy saving initiatives within the fiscal year 2020 to 2023. So this is old data, but it took us a long time to get it out to the public. That's 1.2 million metric tons of emissions prevented from going to the atmosphere. That's not credits or renewable energy credits or carbon credits or anything like that. It represents the equivalent of about 3 billion car miles worth of emissions from going to the atmosphere, just on Xbox platform alone, only on Xbox consoles. But because we did that through greening the source code, we know that we're making multiple times that kind of impact on competitors' platforms by reducing their emissions for them as well.
That's really interesting. Congratulations. Yeah, awesome. Any last comments since we're about to wrap up?
Blockchain, to me, is one of the most important and interesting frontiers in sustainability. There is so little literacy and awareness of how important it is. And so I really think that this skill set, I'm always so pleased when I hear Yorke's reports of the classes that he's teaching and the lecturing that he's giving, because it's allowing capacity building among younger entrants to different pieces of the market, and that is really promising to me. We've been talking a bit about some of the engagement in Minecraft, using Minecraft as game-based play to familiarize different groups to close the green skills gap with representation of different elements of technology. We have a presentation tomorrow at Goals House on the use of Minecraft to introduce modules on GIS raster data sets and AI to identify illegal deforestation. And I'm really excited about forthcoming modules on blockchain and traceability in this supply chain too.
Yeah, the course material on Minecraft and AI and deforestation, it was fascinating. I was looking at it, and it's meant for people who are very young, which is also interesting.
Or young at heart.
Yes, that's right. Because I definitely want to adapt it to my students in the grad program. So thank you, everyone. And by the way, all of the comments about blockchain were unprompted. So I guess I've done my work over the last couple of years. Thank you, Trista.
Thanks for having me.
Round of applause. That was great. Loved it. Awesome. All right. We're going to keep going. That was a nice surprise. Thank you, Trista, for joining us up here. That was great.